Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Cyber Strategy for Government webinar today. Thank you so much for tuning in on this lovely Thursday morning. I hope you're all having a great week and looking forward to some really awesome discussions from our speakers today. We've got some really cool content lined up for you, and I'm hoping you're all looking forward to it. I hope you've all brought questions. I hope you've all brought queries and are ready to engage in this material with us today, because we're really looking forward to the presentations coming up. I just thought I'd kind of give out a couple housekeeping things before we get things started. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is the digital gift bag that is on your screens. There is a lot of really cool content that you can download in there today that touches on some of the content and topics that will be discussed. So if you want to have a look at more information about what is being discussed today, check out the digital gift bag, have a look in there and see if there's anything in there that you guys might be interested in downloading, and definitely go ahead and do that. We will have question and answers at the end of each session today. So in the Q&A box on your screens, make sure that you use that today. This is an opportunity to ask our presenters anything and pick their brains. So make sure that you ask us questions, send us questions, and we'll get to those live at the end of each session. And that will be an opportunity for us to ask them the questions and get a live response on the platform. The other thing is that we will have poll questions throughout the day. I know that we're not in person, so it's sometimes tricky on virtual events to get a feel for the room and the profile and who's actually joining us. So we have those poll questions so that you guys can actually send us your feedback and your responses to some of the questions that are discussed today, because it's always great to get an understanding of where you guys are at. So with that being said, I will kick off the day with the first poll question that I wanted to send to you all, just to get a feel for where you guys are at with things. So the question I want to ask you is, what cyber control frameworks does your organization align with? Is it none? Is it NIST? Is it Essential 8? Is it ISO 27001? Or is it another one? So let me know. It'd be great to know where you guys are and what kind of control framework you guys align with. So let us know, and I'll give you a few seconds to respond to that. So I'll give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at what you guys said. So 62.5% of you align with Essential 8. So that's very interesting. The majority of you are with Essential 8 and then ISO 27001 and then other. So that's very interesting. So thanks for participating in that. The second question I want to ask you all today is, do you have the ability to identify and prioritize cyber issues across all networks, on-premise and cloud, as well as IoT? So yes, no, not needed, or no, but plan to in the future. So let me know there. I'll give you 10 seconds to answer that, and then we'll have a look. Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's have a look what you guys said. 50% of you said yes, 50% of you said no, but plan to in the future. So that's really good. And that's a really great insight into where you guys are all at, particularly with that. So thank you so much for participating in those. That's just a little warm up, but I'd like to introduce our introductory and my co-chair for today, I guess you could say, to introduce some of the material. So Gus is the cybersecurity and biometric specialist. He's from NEC, and he is going to give a little intro to you guys today. So Gus, how are you? Please take it away.
Well, thank you, Isaac. Welcome, everyone. I think Isaac's already stole my thunder there. I think I was meant to have my camera off and I couldn't figure out how to turn it off, which I've done so now. So welcome to today's webinar. My name is not Mike Inge, as it said on the website. I'm Gus Fay, as Isaac introduced me, Cyber and Smart Cities Specialist at NEC. Today we've got a great lineup of speakers and panellists. I'm actually really excited about our partnership with AWS and Fortinet, which really is a 1 + 2 + 3 = 10 arrangement. Together, we are more than the sum of its parts. Let me explain quickly what that really means. AWS really needs no intro. They're a world leader in data, cloud, modern delivery methods, SaaS, PaaS and IaaS. They're leaders in the delivery of software, platform and infrastructure in a secure way. They've been aligned to Essential 8 and all the government standards for a long time. They've invested heavily in government data centres in this region. Fortinet, world leader, absolute giant in the cyber world. Pioneers across the convergence of operational technology and information tech. Leaders in cloud, IoT, and they're leading the way in the prep for the Critical Infrastructure Act, and we'll hear more about that in a minute. NEC, a lot of people don't realise that we're actually pioneers in safe cities. We're a world leader for over 30 years, delivering biometrics and access control systems into the public sector. We have aviation, transport, defence and policing over our 50-year history in Australia. This gives us a unique insight into some of the challenges across privacy, ethics, risk and governance. In a world where change is the only constant, as cyber professionals, you all are well aware that we're subject to this notion more than any other group. It's our partnerships that are more than the sum of its parts that make the difference. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is if we all work together, we can truly turn security into an enabler of business and not the traditional roadblocker, as some may believe. With that in mind, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, Dr. Chris Perris, author, speaker, professor, 20-year cyber pro, and now with AWS. So I'd like to hand the baton over to Chris.
Thank you, Gus. Just a quick sound check.
Yep, all good.
Everyone. Great, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Gus. Thank you, Isaac. As Gus mentioned, I'm Chris. I'm from AWS. Again, thank you for the opportunity and great to be here to share some thoughts on security in the cloud from AWS perspective. Just a quick intro, just to add to what Gus said there. So I've been in cybersecurity for around 20 years, mainly around defense and intelligence space, in the national security space. One of the interesting things I did in the last couple of years is actually build a cyber fusion center where we had a one arm doing capability on AWS and another arm building capability on Microsoft Azure. So that was a very interesting experience, which basically articulated the value of the multi-cloud security challenges we are facing, and frankly was the genesis for my latest book. So again, I'm happy to share some of these findings with you today. And just to finish off, my focus areas are polymorphic ransomware, quantum-proof crypto, and zero trust computing. So just very quickly to set some expectations on this on our presentation, I do have about 15-20 minutes, so it's going to be more of a level 100, 200 capability session at the platform level. I've put my details in there, my email address and my LinkedIn profile, if you want to navigate to. Sorry, was there a question? So I'll move on. Yeah, I put my details in there. So if there's any questions you want me to drill into later, feel free to reach out. So let's get into the presentation. So look, as Gus said, AWS is well known in the industry, so I'm not going to spend much time on an introduction. But I just want to focus on this quote, essentially in the context of cloud computing and what AWS do. And you may recognize this gentleman, Mr. Andy Jassy, who's the Amazon CEO currently. Before that, he was the AWS CEO. And he's very famous for saying there is no compression algorithm for experience. So this is very true when it comes to what we do as AWS. So AWS has been in the cloud service provider space since its inception. In our experience, customers are choosing us over other providers because it has a lot more functionality, the largest and most vibrant community of customers and partners like NEC and Fortinet, and the most proven operational and security expertise, in our opinion. We believe we have unmatched experience, maturity, reliability, security, and performance. Just to give you some insight into the way AWS operates, we call security as job zero. And you may hear that in the media sometimes. What it means is security is paramount and non-negotiable when it comes to customer engagements in the context of AWS. So we are very, very focused on providing a secure platform. We have been continually expanding our services to support virtually any cloud workload. And funny enough, the area that I'm working in, we actually specialize in hosting Windows capability on AWS, out of all things. So you may not know that you can actually efficiently host Windows workloads on AWS. And according to IDC, AWS can do it 30% cheaper than any other competitor. So some little bit of nuggets for you to take away from this presentation. Just moving on, we have services. Last time I looked at about 175 plus services on compute, storage, database, networking, analytics, robotics, machine learning, and AI, and especially in our context today, Internet of Things, capability and operational technology, and which Andrew will touch on a little bit later. Excuse me. With millions and active customers around the world, we have a very extensive partner network. So I really want to draw some attention to NEC and Fortinet on that, especially NEC. They have a great identity platform running on AWS with biometric data, secured through the AWS blockchain distributed ledger systems, and Gus may touch on it a little bit later. So I recommend you audience to go and have a bit of a look on that capability. Fortinet and AWS work very closely. Fortinet is AWS security partner and worked on many customer engagements. I think Andrew will touch on it much more. And there's even some public case studies in Australia with the iCare insurance provider, just to call out. So you may want to get familiar with that content from a local case study perspective. Okay, so moving on. Look, I'm not going to spend too much time on it. This is more of a context setting, in how the security landscape is changing over the years. Everyone on this presentation, I assume they're seasoned professionals. So before cloud computing came along, we had to do on-premises environment, we had to do the whole end-to-end security as systems administrators or on-premise administrators, all the way from the data center capability, the hardware security, the software security, client-side, server-side, platform, customer data, all was actually in the context. So basically, was managed by the systems administrators. And as you know, there's a lot of ISM controls and PSPF controls that goes with it. And just to give you some idea, if you look at the ISM or the PSPF, it's from last count about somewhere around 600 plus, even more security controls that you have to get through. So when cloud computing came along, there was an interesting shift. I'm sure everyone's heard about this shared responsibility model, where it gets interesting. And I like to share. I remember a few years ago when we first started doing cloud computing and infrastructure hosting. I remember one of the very first CISOs I dealt with basically said to me, "Chris, we are moving to the cloud now, so all the issues I had with my security is now your problem." So, and I remember having a very detailed conversation on this shared responsibility model with him, basically. So what it comes down to is, what we call security in the cloud. In simple words, anything to do with customer data, customer relationships, anything that the customer controls is still within the full control of the customer. So security in the cloud is with the customer. The responsibility, but security of the cloud, which is the underlying infrastructure provider, hardware maintenance, patch management, etc., is the responsibility of the CSP, or the cloud service provider, in this case, AWS. So how does that relate to, how does that relate to the customers? What are the guidance being provided from AWS? So this is something, a key takeaway from this presentation. As I said, security in the cloud, which is the customer responsibility part. We have a tool called the AWS Well Architected tool. Essentially, I would urge you to work with your solution architects or enterprise architects working with AWS partners such as NEC. We provide this tool called the Well Architected tool, where you can essentially have it's a free tool to start with. You can essentially have a questionnaire run through your whole capability, your product, in the context of operational excellence, security, reliability, performance, efficiency, and cost optimization. So there are 5 pillars of this AWS Well Architected tool. You will answer many questions on that, and it will do a gap analysis, and it will actually give you a report at the end of the day saying these are the recommendations. So there is some help available to address the security in the cloud part. And also, if you want to be familiar with the security of the cloud or what AWS controls, there are tools available, specifically AWS Cloud Compliance, which is the assurance programs of finance, healthcare, government, and the other verticals. There's also a tool called the AWS Artifact. This is, again, a no-cost self-service portal for on-demand access to all the AWS compliance reports. So I saw earlier in our poll, a lot of people are interested in the Essential 8. For example, the federal customers and state customers, they do a lot of IRAP certifications and protected certifications, or assessments they call it now, not certifications. And those reports are available on the AWS Artifact tool. So I would urge you to go and have a bit of a look around there. Okay, so just quickly moving on. This is to set a context setting. So in my presentation, I just like to frame it essentially in this case with a phrase from Warren Buffett, as you may know, a renowned investor. This is a more take on his investment strategy, but it applies to many facets of life, as you can gather. Not knowing the risk will contribute to bad decisions, anxiety, and eventual failure of any project. In this example, the surfer on the screen may have underestimated the conditions, the wave size, or the weather, or simply he or she may not have the skills. This is the same in the context of security. If you're unaware of the environment, supply chain, IT, and OT environments, which Andrew will touch on later, and the compliance criteria, which Gus will touch on later, you are exposing more risk to your business. So moving on how do we mitigate this risk from a very high level from AWS perspective. AWS is vigilant about your privacy as our customers. Because our customers care deeply about data security, we have world-class team of security experts monitoring our systems 24/7 to protect your customer data. With AWS, you can build on the most secure global infrastructure, knowing you always own your data, and that's a key point. You always own your data, including the ability to encrypt it, move it, and manage the retention as per policy. All the data flowing across the AWS global network that interconnects our data centers and regions is automatically encrypted at the physical layer before it leaves our secured facilities. Additional encryption layers is also available. For example, all the virtual private cloud cross-region peering traffic and customer or services requests, they're all TLS encrypted. We also provide easy encryption in transit and at rest to help ensure that only authorized users can access it, using the keys managed by the AWS Key Management Systems, or KMS. And you can also have your encryption stored on a cloud hardware secure module or cloud HSN. And I can go into more detail if you're interested in the Q&A session on this. Also, to touch on, we also give you the control and the visibility you need to help demonstrate that you comply with regional and local data privacy regulations. So this is where the data actually stays in country or data sovereignty challenges we face. And there's a lot of documentation available on the AWS artifact link I showed you earlier. Just to touch on some other thing, another other key piece is a confidential computing piece. I know we're talking to mainly public sector customers here on more on the open cloud, but if there's a requirement for protected or secret or air-gap environments or confidential computing, we can provide Nitro Enclave capability for confidential computing, especially in the context of air-gapped environments. And I'm happy to take the conversation offline, have a further conversation on that. Okay, so just checking on our time. I think we're traveling well. Okay, so every Q&A session, the very first question I get is ransomware, usually. So let me just quickly touch on this. Look, ransomware is probably the most prevalent attack vector. Obviously, email phishing is there, but eventually lead to some ransom, which will disrupt your business. It is growing very rapidly. I think according to the latest stats, there's I mean, these are usually America-based or USA-based stats, but it says every 11 seconds, there's a ransomware attack at the enterprise level in America. And the cost of the business just in 2021 in the American economy is around $20 billion just from ransomware attacks. So it is a very big number. And we have seen, I've managed cyber fusion centers, on multiple platforms for many years. We have seen in some cases when a bad actor enters your environment through email phishing or fear phishing, the security hygiene is so poor that the whole system is compromised and you're under active ransomware attack within 45 minutes. So things can go, as they say, pear-shaped very quickly. So let me just quickly address that. How do we do that? So the key thing to do is actually as you can see on the screen, prevention is better than the cure. So in ransomware, frankly, it is the poor hygiene that gets you. Once you're compromised, I mean, frankly, there is no magic bullet to recover. So the way to recover is to have resiliency built into your data recovery plan, essentially. So this is where things like Amazon S3 versioning of the buckets, object locking, and also a capability called Cloud Endure disaster recovery. So this is a very highly scalable disaster recovery service we have where you can bring your existing environments within minutes after ransomware attacks. So we urge you to look into this. This will really give you a best protection against ransomware attacks. Quickly moving on to the other parts. This is just to share with you some of the compliance controls. As I told before, some of you have actually looked into it. This is more of a global scale. What's important to us is probably things like IRAP down here. For example, if you are in the defense or intelligence space, there are certifications on the ITARs and some other FireEyes or certification criteria also that I can touch on if there's any questions. Okay, just some customer references. Just to give you an idea that who's already using it. You can see the logos on the screen. And this is just public sector. So as you can see, a lot of our federal and state public sector customers are already on AWS doing a lot of great projects, including a lot of great security projects. Right, so I think I've got about 5 minutes, so very quickly to dive into a bit more detail. And again, unfortunately, I won't be able to spend a lot of time. As you can see, every one of these security solutions, identity access management, detection, infrastructure protection, data protection, and especially incident response, Every one of these services is essentially like a presentation by itself for, probably an hour or two. But I will quickly touch on a couple of the key ones, especially in the context of identity and access management. We know from experience, contrary to popular belief, it's not the ninjas who's coming down from data center roofs and basically hacking to the servers that disrupt your environments. 80% of the time, it's actually bad hygiene or a poor configuration decision that actually results in a cyber attack. And another data point here is we know from experience 30% of the employees use their personal emails to share work material in the world of hybrid workplace these days. Again, about 1/3 of the workers use the same password across all devices. So, and also 45% of employees use personal devices for work purposes. So this is a fact of life, and that actually opens up the risk of identity and access management. So in that context, I would ask you to look into some of these IAM controls and some of the specific services such as Cognito, which is identity management for your applications. There's a service called AWS Detective, which investigates potential security services. There's a great product called Amazon Guard Duty. So I would recommend you to spend a bit more time on Amazon Guard Duty. This is where we correlate all the information we get from all our data centers around the world. We apply artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms, and we can actually predict analysis of some of the attacks going in. So, and in some cases, we say to our customers, by having Guard Duty and the intelligence that provide, you're actually 4 to 6 weeks in front of the attack vectors or where the attacks are coming. So 4 to 6 weeks, you're in front, and you have the intelligence before the attackers try to attack you. So please look into that. Another key ones are things like AWS Inspector. That's to analyze the application security level, EC2 level capability. There's a tool called AWS Macy to discover and protect your sensitivity data. And also a great place called Security Hub, where we unify all the security and compliance capability together. So again, there are lots of information, but look, I'm happy to spend a bit of time with you later if there's any specific questions. So look, I think the next slide, it's, some of the top 10 takeaways, and these are very, I've already touched on this, but if you take one slide away from this presentation, it probably will be this slide, what you could do immediately to your environment. It's not, I already touched on it, make sure the data is accurate, especially using multi-factor authentications. We know from experience, once you apply MFA or multi-factor authentication, 98%, that actually prevents 98% of the intrusions coming in. So it's something that you can very quickly implement, tick box, and subscribe to your service, and you get multi-factor authentication. Another key thing, without going into too much detail here, is the least privileges, essentially. So rather than giving admin access to all the controllers, make sure you control your access. Keep the least amount of privileges to your admins and to your users. So there's going to be a lot of, you can stop a lot of intrusions by doing least privilege access. So I can see Isaac coming on the screen. So I think I'm just about my time. But look, okay, if there's any time, I'm happy to answer a couple of questions. But thank you for your time, and hopefully it's been valuable. Over to you, Isaac.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much for that awesome presentation and sharing those insights with everybody. There's a couple of really cool slides in there, so thank you so much for joining us today. There's one question that comes from an audience. Now, he's addressed it to all the speakers, so I will ask you this first. But this person has asked what the New South Wales Australian government policy on paying ransom is, and if there was contingencies for such scenarios. So do you have any thoughts on that?
So just to paraphrase, this is the New South Wales government's policy. Is that correct, on paying ransomware?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Look, Good question. My understanding is, I mean, I think it's universal. The policy is not to pay, frankly. So the policy is not to get there to start with, as in, like I said, ransomware, the only way to combat ransomware is, frankly, prevention. So we got to have a prevention mechanism in place, a disaster recovery plan in place, have tools like, what I mentioned in the presentation with Cloud Endure. So, look, I'll leave it to the other panel. That's my understanding. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if there are no other questions for Chris, if you guys have any questions for him between now and the end of today, just send them in the Q&A box and just reference him at the beginning of that, and then Chris can always answer your questions offline as well. So I'm sure he doesn't mind if you were to connect with him on LinkedIn. His LinkedIn is on the speaker bios, so you can always connect with him from there. But Chris, thank you so much for presenting and joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Isaac.
No problem. So everybody, I've got one more question I want to ask you all, and the poll questions are back. So what I wanted to ask is, does your department run operational technology and or information technology? Is it yes? Is it no, not needed? Or is it no, but plan to in the future? So have a look at those, give me an answer, and we'll have a look at those in real time after a couple seconds. So I'll give you all 10 seconds to answer that, and then move on to the next one. All right, let's have a look at those results and see. So the question was, does your department run operational technology and or information technology? And 63.6% of you said yes. 9.1% of you said no, not needed, and then 27% of you have said no, but you plan to in the future, which is quite interesting. So the majority of you do, which is very good to see. So I am going to introduce our next presenter for today, Andrew Sheedy, who is the Director of OT Solutions at Fortinet, and he's going to be discussing the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act, capable and compliant with Fortinet. So Andrew, if you want to flick your camera on, you'll come up on the screen and I'll let you start presenting. So Andrew, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Isaac. Can
Wonderful.
you hear me?
Yes, I can, yeah. Go for it.
Okay, thank you. Let me just bring up my presentation. Good morning. Can we see that, Isaac? Is that come up okay?
Just a second. At the moment, it's just grey screen. Oh, there we go. Yep.
Good to go. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name's Andrew Sheedy. I'm the Director of OT Solutions at Fortinet. Fortinet, as Gus introduced us earlier, we're a global cybersecurity organisation that comes from a pure networking background with next generation firewalls, and we've evolved into developing a whole lot of applications that allow us to help organisations throw a security blanket across their architecture. We're probably heading towards north of 3 billion in revenue, offices globally, and I think from a local point of view, one of the things that we're really trying to focus on with our clients and customers now is that the security posture that you can achieve needs to be not only aligned with appropriate standards, but it's going to need to, organisations are going to need to be capable and compliant with the Critical Infrastructure Act that is on its way. And for those of you who may not have heard, the Act has been in Senate subcommittee hearings and meetings for quite some time. And the result of those has been that industry has pushed back on some of the requirements, and the Act is going to be split in two. Part one of the bill is going to enable government to do to have certain powers that enable it to help organisations that end up being compromised, manage their way through a crisis, and then it's going to have the methodology and the process to be able to manage their environment better in part 2, and that should come through next year. I think it's going to be, they're trying to get it passed by Christmas, but it could be passed any day. Other than that, it sounds like it'll be passed in the new year. So what's actually happened is that the original Act that is in existence right now has been expanded, and Fortinet has clients with the whole spectrum of maturity in cybersecurity capability. So we've got people that are just starting the journey, those that perhaps have not neglected but haven't had time or the energy to focus on security, and those that are extremely mature, that have developed and been had their ISMS compliant with 27001 or 62443 for over 10 years. And some of those organisations are looking to go beyond one single standard and are in fact starting to cherry pick certain parts, controls and domains of other standards to enable them to increase their security posture even further. So the organisations that are now in scope from the original Act are the telcos, financial services, the data storage and processing, the IT organisations like AWS, the food chain and the food supply chain for groceries, transport, the defence industry, naturally, higher education, research, energy production, distribution of power and gas, healthcare, space technology, and water and sewage. So for those of you that are keeping an eye on the IT press, you're probably well aware that most of these industries have had a ransomware attack or some sort of compromised situation occur in the last 10 years. And the four primary threat vectors that they come from us haven't really changed. The first one, the major one, being nation-state attacks, a very sophisticated, structured approach. The second one being script kiddies or hacktivists, people just starting out. Third being organised, third, organised crime, which is predominantly the ransomware approach. And then fourth is a disgruntled insider. So those four attack vectors are still trying to cause pain across all of these industries. And the government has decided that to help organisations become more robust in their security posture, to put this Act together to force certain things. And I'll talk about those, how we can achieve what I think they're really trying to achieve a little bit later. The interesting one that I still think is causing lots of debate, and we're not really sure what the actual rules are going to be, and we'll see those as they come out, but the inclusion of the supply chain to anybody who supplies any products or services to the 11 sectors, the fact that it's at the discretion of the minister to bring a supplier into scope and then enforce certain rules of discovery and access on them is something that I personally, I think that they just need to tighten it up. I don't disagree with it in concept, but I think they need to tighten up the process of how they're going to actually do that. And that could be anybody who's supplying anybody. So even an organisation that's supplying technology or services or fuel, it doesn't really matter what you're supplying. If you have some form of electronic access to an organisation, that's going to get picked up and brought into things. And I think one of the reasons why I'm such a huge supporter of the standards is that each of the standards has, whilst they have their own varying degrees of complexity, they all have remote access sections that deal with managing the onboarding and offboarding of remote access so that we can make sure we have the right authorised and authenticated people accessing our data. So the intent of the Act, I think, primarily is positive. It is to try and help organisations uplift their security posture. So they're putting some certain checkpoints in place that organisations are going to need to comply with. State-based compliance, I'm sure you're all aware, particularly those in Victoria that I'm familiar with. The audit that is already underway and is now being done as an annual task is mature and maturing. I think I'd like to see it more tightly aligned to some of the standards or a section or a cross-section of the standards so that an organisation has the opportunity to uplift itself and not just fill out a form and be compliant so that they can tick a box on an audit report. I think we have to really start to try and build out this security culture, but I'll talk about that a little bit more earlier, and Gus talked about it as well. So,
hi,
risk
Andrew.
management.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We're just noticing your slides aren't moving along. So I just wanted to check to make sure that your slides, if you were moving them, and if not, we'll just find the slide that you're at.
Okay. Would you like me to start? I am moving along, so would...
Which slide are you up to?
Part 2, risk management program.
Let's just quickly pull that one up. Continue on your way. Just bear with me a second.
This is what I love about webinars. They're always a bit of a challenge. You should learn to sing a song, Andrew. Here we go.
All right, so I've got the slide up in the presentation slide box rather than the screen share. So while you are flicking through, just tell me where you're up and I'll move them along for you.
Oh, all right. Should I stop sharing?
Because then they're not. Yeah, stop sharing your screen because they're not coming through anymore. So we'll just move from there, and then I'll flick through for you while you're moving along.
Okay, so
we're at risk management programs.
Okay, thanks. So the risk management program is trying to help organisations identify all the assets within their architecture, and then can conduct a proper risk assessment using something like an ISO 31000 as a methodology. And as part of that methodology, that means that the organisation is forced to pick a standard or a couple of the standards, either global, international standards, or some of the domestically federal or state-based standards like ISM or Victoria's security obligations, and then conduct the heat map or produce a maturity model using that standard or sections of those standards as a terms of reference to be able to do the assessment against. And because there's so many controls in some of the standards, and they range from ISO 27001 at 114 controls, depending on statement of applicability, through to 62443 or ISM at over 1,000 controls, it's a substantial uplift in work to be able to conduct that assessment thoroughly. So we find that when organisations use something like NIST, the assessments that I've worked on in the consulting space have primarily been at the high level on the sections or the categories of NIST rather than individual controls. And we still use the individual controls because they're the bits that actually make it the deliverable, and they're the ones that are going to uplift security posture. So mandatory reporting is another part. Has that moved advanced now? Okay, Isaac?
Yeah, it sure has.
Okay, so the mandatory reporting component of the bill is designed to ensure that organisations notify ASD in an appropriate time window. Now, what it was originally going to be within 12 hours and 24 hours, my understanding is that that's going to be changed to, I think it's 84 hours. So that's going to give organisations a lot longer. But in order to be able to do that reporting within that window, I think one of the real intentions is to try and reduce the time that it takes to detect that an organisation is in fact having an incident. So the next slide I'm going to show you and I apologise for the content, there's too much on it, but it does give me the opportunity to walk you through a process on how an organisation can be capable and compliant with the Act. So I'll just advance to that slide. So Isaac, has that come up okay?
Yep, it sure has.
Okay, so the method of the madness with this slide is to break down the Fortinet security fabric and its capability in one section. In the center, I've got a model called the Purdue model. For those that haven't seen the Purdue model before, it's an academic or theoretical representation of a typical architecture. And at the bottom, we have process or OT architecture. At the bottom, we have process control and operational technology sections. And that's things like PLCs and SCADA systems that most buildings in Australia are starting to evolve to using building management systems where devices within that building are controlled by PLCs and control systems. That model, all those devices and things are at the bottom of the model. The center is the traditional IT, zones 5 and 4 are the traditional IT department, head office or business zone or organizational zone. And then the top section is a cloud. And then what we're seeing, and then on the left-hand side of the slide, I've got my cybersecurity program. And then down the bottom, I've got some of our vendor partners and organizations that we work with. So I think, as I was talking about risk assessments, so the concept of risk assessment is to identify all the assets across the architecture that are deployed within the Purdue model, pretty much trying to discover anything with an IP address, and then conduct a risk assessment or assess risk for each device. And that's a comprehensive task in itself if you think about the number of devices that organizations have. And that's doing determining things. And if you do that and align it to one of the standards, you start to gain a pretty accurate picture on your maturity for remote access, for policy, for procedure, for understanding things like onboarding and offboarding people and giving them enabling access through AD, et cetera, et cetera. So that whole process and building out that checklist really helps an organization's IT and security department and the business people start to build peace of mind and document that so that they can roll that up to the board and they can start to feel more comfortable that their security posture is being increased. So once we've got this risk assessment document, I'll just talk about the program for a minute, is getting that strategy and governance piece right. So that's taking the risk assessment, making sure that we've got all the assets identified, we've got a remediation plan against those assets, and then we've taken that to the board to ask for funding or to the C-suite management team to ask for funding in order to enable the use cases and the objectives or the things within the environment that you'd like to deploy to help increase the security posture. Once you've got that strategy document done, the next piece is the security architecture documentation. I still think this is one of the most challenging parts of the documentation to deliver because to do it really well, you need to use a model like a SABSA or a TOGAF model that really gives you a picture, that builds out a word picture of who, what, why, where, how, when, and when across the entire architecture so that we understand the business requirements, why we have certain technology deployed, why we need certain people to manage that, and we've documented the process that everybody's going to follow to carry out that business objective. That's a substantial piece of work for those, and those of you who have done something like that will know what sort of obligation that involves. And then the implementation phase is when we take the architecture, we purchase technology, or we do proof of concept. We can get factory acceptance testing done or site acceptance testing done to ensure that what we thought we were going to buy, in fact, delivers on the promise, either on-prem or in the cloud, and that it delivers operational efficiency. This whole area up here is a consulting piece that Fortinet relies heavily on partners like NEC to deliver. It really, Fortinet's role in this is we are the component layer of the security architecture. Our technology enables the strategy and the business requirements to be delivered upon. And Fortinet effectively becomes the glue that can enable secure access across the zones within this architecture. And it can enable us to gain visibility of this architecture as well, which I'll talk about a bit in a sec. So then finally, when we come to monitoring and incident response capability, that's ensuring that the disaster recovery plan and incident response plan has been fully documented. It's not a simple task. It does need to be done very well. And when I've worked on DR plans and IR plans, the method of the madness that I've always used is, could I give this plan to somebody who knows nothing about our organisation if I'm not here, and they could go ahead and carry this out without me? And so that, and I think if we think of developing documentation with that level of detail, it starts to become a lot clearer as to what we really have in place to enable it, or where the gaps are and how we need to tidy up those gaps. And then finally, training. I mean, training is something that is just critical for this whole security posture to be delivered upon. And I see training in two parts. Firstly, there's basic security awareness training. What does a phishing email look like? How do we try and prevent ransomware occurring in the first place? We need to train our people on what a phishing email looks like and how we can actually prevent them from clicking on it in the first place. And the second part is training on all the policy, process and procedure that we've developed as part of this documentation phase. And I think this needs to be done at onboarding, when we bring people on board, and then an annual review, even if it's a working lunch. And the whole concept there, by doing this training piece really well, is we start to build that security culture, that human firewall, if you like, that helps us protect the core architecture. And it does so by enabling us to get people on board to start to feel confident in helping each other look at something. So that if I receive an email that I think looks a bit dodgy, I can ask the guy sitting next to me with absolute confidence that, hey, this doesn't quite look right. What do you reckon? And you can start to build that level of confidence to where you don't feel fearful to ask for help, and you just want to do it, because prevention is absolutely one of the best forms of cure here. So the Fortinet security fabric and our technology, for those of you that have already got us and using us, you'll know that our core platform technology has been around for over 20 years. Our firewalls and our next generation firewalls, our switching technology and WAF technology, access points, is quite mature. The applications that we've got, our management for policy tools for policy across this hardware is well embraced by IT people that use it and admins that use it. But where we're going, we're spending a lot of money on R&D, is developing our smart technology around things like deception, threat management. We work with the Five Eyes nations and Interpol and various other police departments and organisations and other vendors to capture data and threats that are occurring globally, and then sharing them with our customers so that the security team can hopefully take some action, or if they don't take any action, they can just be aware that whilst a vulnerability may be found within the architecture, they can be prepared to look for it and look for any indicators of compromise across the stack, because they're sort of forearmed is forewarned. Deception, multi-factor authentication, endpoint protection, and then the big one where we're seeing a lot of activity now is our SIEM technology. So our SIEM solution differs from most organisations in that it's the licensing model is by the device within the architecture, not by the volume of data that you ingest, which basically means that we can give you access to more logs from more devices faster, and then enable the NOC and the SOC team to scope their reporting. And we talked about visibility earlier, but it's to enable visibility projects that I've seen be tremendously successful have spent most of their time in the scoping phase by identifying all the key metrics of all the assets that have been deployed in the architecture, and then understanding trying to build out a normal zone, so that organisations build these big normals, and this is what normal for us looks like, and we only want our teams to be alerted for events that start to go above the line or below the line. So we move reporting from green ticks to acceptable zone, and we try and minimise false positives and wasting time on things in there. So that's a big piece of work. It's not for this topic, but it's something that's coming. So I'll just move on to the three things that I think organisations are going to need to do as part of enabling themselves to be, I'm saying capable and compliant with the Critical Infrastructure Act, only because I'm not sure there's a better way to describe it at this point in time. But I see there's three key things that they're trying to achieve and that are going. Firstly is the identification of assets, doing that risk assessment using 31,000, I've got missing a zero there, versus, and then using one of the standards or guidelines as a terms of reference so that we can produce that heat map against the domains of one of the standards so that we start to build out that picture. And then looking at that architecture and enabling that visibility. So how can we identify an event early, and then what's our plan to enable it, and how we're going to report on that. And if you can't identify an incident and then report on it, and then demonstrate capability on how you're going to manage an incident, or how you're going to cope with a return to normal operations plan, it's going to be very difficult. And that's where I think it's a little bit concerning. But if the federal government's going to enable themselves capability to enter a site or send a team from ASD into your organisation to start looking at what is going on, what is the incident, and conducting their own forensic analysis of your architecture, I think that potentially opens organisations to more risk. I'm not sure how that's really going to play out and who's going to pay for it. I don't think that's been agreed to yet either. But in essence, this is good security hygiene for an organisation to embrace these. And if you're using a standard, either the state, federal or international standards, or cherry picking controls from those standards to come up with that checklist of controls that you're going to measure yourself against, there's enough width and depth within those controls now to provide a pretty good security posture for an organisation. Even with Essential 8, there's certainly enough controls when we drill down into what that really means. So how do we go about it? Fortinet encourages everybody to talk to partners like NEC, conduct that gap analysis, document the scope and get the architecture done really well, and then implement that architecture, test it, do the pen testing, and then test it, and then operate it, and then test it again, and do the training to the point where people are confident and capable with cybersecurity. And we've got a long way to go, I think, before we can start to see security build out like safety, but I think we can get there as long as we keep doing some core fundamentals. So that's pretty much it for my presentation today. I hope we've got something there. I think as soon as the Act goes live, hopefully it will get enough media coverage that people will start to embrace it and what its real intention is, which I think at the end of the day really is to try and uplift the security capability and protect Australia's critical infrastructure from cyber attack, and if and when that does happen, enable organisations to be able to deal with it and manage a process to remediate the attack and put together a return to normal set of guidelines. Because some of the incidents we've seen around the world now, it's pretty clear that we need to enable that to happen. So that's pretty much within my time slot. I hope I haven't gone over too long, Isaac, but I can now just hand back to you.
No worries. Thank you so much, Andrew, and thank you so much for sharing those insights with everyone and being here with us today to present and share. It was great to have you along. There aren't any questions from the audience, but I will just reiterate, if you do have questions for Andrew, whether it is right now or if it is later on and you think of something, send it in the Q&A and Andrew can still answer it for you guys. Alternatively, you can connect with Andrew, whose LinkedIn is connected to the speaker bio next to him. So definitely connect with him post-event offline and reach out. Same thing with all of our speakers today. I'm sure they wouldn't mind talking to you guys post-event. But Andrew, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
No problem.
Wonderful. So I would like to ask our audience another question. And the question that I wanted to ask you all is, how much time does your security staff invest in chasing alerts and log-related issues? So the options for you are none, small amount of time, or majority of their time. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you guys do, what your security staff do in terms of investing their time, and we'll have a look at those results, and then we'll move into our panel discussion. So, how much time does your security staff invest in chasing alerts and logging related issues? Is it none? Is it a small amount of their time, or is it a majority of their time? Let's have a look at the results from you guys now. So most of you said a small amount of their time and 25% of you said none. And then none of you said that was the majority of their time. So that's quite interesting, and perhaps there's some discussion there around whether or not that is an area of priority for people. So have a think about that, guys. And if you've got any thoughts, definitely put them in the Q&A because we could always talk about that next. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to call upon our two panelists who are joining me today. So I would like to call upon Ian Robinson, who's the Chief Information Officer at Water New South Wales, and AJ Dalmeda, who's the Enterprise Security Architect at WorkSafe Victoria. So AJ and Ian, if you wanted to give me a test 1, 2 for your microphones, just to make sure that I can hear you guys.
Yep.
Hi, Isaac.
Can you hear me?
Ian Robinson.
Yes, I can. Hi, guys. How you going?
Good,
thanks, Isaac.
Very good, very good. So I just want to thank you both for joining us today. And today we're going to be talking about digitizing transformation in government and the opportunities and challenges in building and developing secure digital citizen journeys in the public sector. So thank you to the two of you for joining us today. And I'm very looking forward to having this conversation with you. But I thought maybe it would be great if the two of you could kind of give a brief introduction as to who you guys are and how you found yourselves in the roles that you're in today and why cybersecurity is important to both of you. So Ian, if you wanted to kick off and give us a little bit of a intro into who you are, that would be great.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm the CIO of Water New South Wales, which, as Andrew just referred to, is in the water industry and caught up in the SOCI Act as part of the critical infrastructure. And I guess my background is, sort of an engineer working in critical infrastructure, whether it's rail or energy or water now. I'm a bit of a broken down old utilities guy at the end of the day. And so I come to you with quite a long experience, which, particularly like Chris's point about you can't compress experience. That just comes with time and learning the hard way. So hopefully I can share some insights from my experience over that time.
Definitely. Well, it's great to have you along, so thanks for being here. And AJ, your turn. How about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Isaac. I started in the security space quite early after doing a bit of programming work. But yeah, out of my interest to break into systems and stuff like that. So I started as a pen tester and then gradually moved along in doing secure designs and stuff like that. I've been working across industries as a consultant for quite some time. I have worked in utilities, banking sectors and all those, and have a broader understanding of how things work around in the various industries and the security postures of those. I've been in WorkSafe for quite some time recently, and have been looking at the architecture space and the security improvements in the organization.
Wonderful. Well, it's great to have you both here today, and I'm excited to put you both on the hot seat and ask you the questions that I've kind of got planned for both of you. So I want to kick things off with a bit of a recap over the last 18 months. And no doubt, as I'm sure you're both aware, that digital transformation has definitely taken over for a lot of organizations, government agencies, departments, etc. So from the both of your perspectives, can you tell us a little bit about the cybersecurity journey over the past 18 months and how that's played into the opportunities and challenges to securing your organizations, particularly from, cyber attacks and that expanded threatscape due to digitization? So Ian, if you wanted to kick things off, can you tell us a little bit about your journey at Water New South Wales?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the differences with Water New South Wales as a state-owned corporation is we have a board and obviously a commercial remit, and so perhaps different to some of the other people here from departments in a budget sector. Our primary, or my primary relationship upwards is with the board, who take responsibility, if you like, for the risk posture or the risk appetite for the organisation. And so really my first and most important relationship is with the board to help them understand and accept the risks that we carry with cyber. And currently, really have developed a regular cadence with the board on education, their own vulnerability for not really understanding cyber, and therefore their recognition of the significant risk it poses to the organisation. And so that conversation revolves around, an assessment of the risk in a level that makes sense from a business person's point of view. And secondly, to demonstrate that the progress we're making on improvement areas is visible. And we've tried a number of techniques to do that, and I know everyone on this call will struggle with how to make that not too technical, how to make it compelling for a board type level person or a senior manager. And where we found success with that is really to focus on the progress on the initiatives. And those initiatives are driven by external audits, which review our cyber maturity and the control gaps that we might have. And then the initiatives we've got to close those gaps are then presented to the board as activities that we're progressing to a timeline and demonstrating completion of that. And that gives the board confidence that there's an evolution occurring. There's a continuous improvement cycle, and there's a commitment from the IT group to execute on the plan. And that plan includes everything that Andrew just spoke about. So, the threat and risk assessment, the security architecture and strategy, the implementation of controls, the measurement of those controls, and the monitoring capability, and the reporting of that monitoring capability back to the board, the tracking of incidents, and the demonstration that we test ourselves with penetration testing, but also incident response practices, simulations, and real events, and it provides a comprehensive view, if you like, of that. And then I think with the broader business, making sure that cyber education is continued. We've just had Cyber Week. We run monthly phishing campaigns, which provide immediate feedback to users on when they've made a mistake with that. So we're getting pretty tricky at tripping them up, but also much better at the knowledge in the business around, the awareness of phishing attacks and the immediate response and conversation that occurs. And I really liked Andrew's point that that talking to the neighbour and just comparing notes and understanding what it is that you saw in that email that made it a phishing email is such a powerful improvement in the business's learning. And I guess the final thing I'd say is, as we move into recognition of the SOCI Act and the need for even greater improvement and more transparency outside our organisation and into the federal government reporting regime, making sure that our external audit and our Essential 8 compliance checking and our board reporting is aligned to the SOCI Act requirements. So I think that in general we're in fairly good shape, but the thing with cyber is it's a continual improvement opportunity, and there's always more to do. And I guess the challenge is always to try and ensure that we build a capable team that is not just the cyber squad, the cyber security experts who are dedicated to that role, but everyone in IT has a role in cyber, and particularly as we go into digital transformation, making sure our application development teams are building guardrails around software development that ensures us that their testing of that product includes cyber testing as part of that, security testing as part of that. But the infrastructure teams, properly patching, that's being overseen by the cyber squad. And so everyone's working in harmony, if you like. That's probably the key shift that we need to make.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's really interesting, and it's really good to kind of hear that there's some movement going on there. And so, AJ, how about you? Can you tell us about the cyber security journey that you've been on, and maybe even talk to can you tell us about your experiences when it comes to how digital transformation and COVID has made government departments, agencies buckle down on their cybersecurity initiatives?
Yeah. So for us, I think the board wasn't much of a challenge, I guess, as Ian mentioned, because probably have a tech-savvy board. I'm not sure. But the security aspects were already looked into, and they were already planned. We went through the Essential 8 and focused on the Essential 8 and getting our basics right. So a lot of the planned items were like patch management, vulnerability management, malware scanning, IDAM, logging and SIEM, which we talked about, privileged access management, looking at cloud, APIs, and the security of APIs as we move into much more the integration environments with other cloud environments, and also the secure development aspects. In our digital strategy, there was lots of prioritization to be done just to support the business in a way. And a lot of the focus came around in the security space because we wanted to move to the cloud and do it more securely as a part of the digital transformation. So the maturity level there was significant. But however, as Ian also mentioned, it's more of a journey sort of a thing. So you start at one level and then you slowly get into it and make yourself more and more mature. With COVID, however, things changed, and a lot of the working model also changed, right? So that took a step back for us in terms of, okay, we had to refocus on, leave the digital strategy hanging around for some time, but also look at, okay, how do we get our business functioning and working? So we had to focus on how people could work from home and do security assessments around those aspects of it, and see that we could still do the business functions properly and have a risk-based approach towards certain things. Once we were comfortable with that, we just moved on and then started again with our digital transformation and focusing on the security elements and the controls that need to be implemented.
Fantastic. And so my next question for the two of you moves into navigating the balance between privacy and public expectations, particularly around digital security whilst tailoring the customer digital experience. So from a government side, you guys work in not necessarily customers, but citizens. And so how did the two of you navigate balancing privacy with public expectation? So maybe AJ, if you wanted to continue on with that question.
Yeah, Yeah, I can. Look, I find it very hard to balance security with business functionality, being very core in security space. But as a team in the organization, I have other teams to balance those things out, which help me. And as we get through, like I would have the CX or the UX team who would say, "Oh, I know you're concerned about the security aspects of it, but you need to look at the accessibility aspect of certain elements or certain functions that we are trying to build in this environment." And then that helps us to think about innovative solutions, right? And look at, okay, how do I improve it and maintain the accessibility part of it so that people can still access the information or service in the digital world, but also improve the security. And sometimes it can be very challenging where you want to improve the security to such an extent that no one can do anything, or it can be the most secure functionality that you provide, but you have to always think out of the box, and there is always a give and take between there. So yeah, having a good team who understands security, but also you being more listening to them in terms of, okay, how do I manage the security aspect of it, instead of just saying that this should be implemented, was really the key for us, I think, in navigating that through those problems.
Yeah, right. And Ian, do you have anything to add on to that question as well?
Yeah, I think AJ's right. The balance is, cybersecurity experts always want lockdown and very restricted capability because their focus is on risk. But I think if you step back from the relationship with customers a little bit and think about why customers share information in the first place, it's because of the utility of the service that we're providing them. And as that utility increases, the customer's trust will increase proportionally. And I think that, as much as we have an obligation to protect customers, I think you can see some examples where cybersecurity problems have occurred, like in Service New South Wales, for example. But all the people I know still go and register their cars there, even though there's been a compromise that's been publicised in user accounts, user details. And so I think, the trust relationship issue goes to, as AJ said, making sure you build a capability that's easy for someone to use, that provides transparency about what information is being shared outside the organisation, making sure that there's robust capabilities around protecting the customer's data, and that we're properly identifying the customer as that customer, because nothing annoys people more than not being tested properly around their identity, and then having their identity compromised, or mistakes being made and people being associated with an asset or a transaction with the wrong person. And so I think those things are really important. But ultimately, our digital transformation is all about seamlessly enabling digital channels with customers, making that digital experience pleasurable to use, but in the background, making the information transparent, and also assuring the customer that we have robust cyber protections in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually that moves into my next question that I have for you both around, making sure that your customer products are, to a satisfactory standard. But how have you ensured trust and customer satisfaction in the digital product, ensuring that it's sustainable but accessible for everyone as well, but whilst also remaining secure? So that accessibility thing with the security thing, how have you guys done that? So maybe Ian, do you want to continue?
Well, I think one of the key things we're doing, and I think all New South Wales government is sort of following this idea, is Service New South Wales provides a great portal for access to citizen needs in the New South Wales government. And so I think increasingly we're seeing the idea of a single experience, which then has trust around it, centred around Service New South Wales being the point at which people's identity is authenticated, and then a shop front, if you like, appears that allows the customer to choose the product that they want. And as much as possible, I think New South Wales government aspiration is to ensure its citizens have trust in that shop, firstly, and secondly, that each of the services that are run by experts who understand it. So in our case, people who understand water licensing or ordering or access rights or the rules around putting in a pump into the river. And those things are really crucial, that there's both the expertise, an automated process, and a shop front that's trusted by the customer. I think the other thing is to ensure that we build infrastructure increasingly leveraging cloud so that we can rapidly respond to customer concerns and feedback and not have the long, painful process of customers raising a problem and then not seeing a response. And so increasingly, I think the reliance on cloud is to accelerate our agility and implement services quicker, and all of that builds reputation and trust in customer relationships.
Yeah, certainly. And AJ, do you have anything additional to add to that?
I think pretty much similar to what Ian mentioned, but we have our own state-wide guidelines that we refer to. A lot of the vendor products that we look at, and especially in the new world where we're going cloud and all those things, there are a few helpful guides provided by the government. We look at the IRAP assessments, as Chris mentioned, for AWS and other products, which provide some sort of guidance, and those reports do help provide that assurance, especially if you're looking at certain level of information where either it is protected or secret. It provides that understanding when you're selecting a product that, okay, this can be controlled or can be improved on, and has the capability to do so. So that makes our life a little bit easier instead of us doing the assessment significantly. Having the ISM and referring to those for more details also provides a good understanding. And it all builds that trust in this environment where, when you're looking at the digital products and a lot of the information out there, and having those certifications and providing that certification to awareness to the customers builds that trust within them. So I would be very happy when if I'm using a multi-factor authentication and the vendor is supposed to use it, or a different form of a control makes him more secure, more like interested in, okay, this is a good product and I can really use it, sort of thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, fantastic. Well, guys, we've actually come to time, but I really appreciate both of you joining me today for this discussion. It's been great to get the two of you to kind of answer those questions and sit in my hot seat while I fire those questions at you. So I really appreciate your insights and sharing with our attendees today. It was great to have you both on, so thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks, Isaac.
Thanks, AJ. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Isaac.
So, not a problem. So everyone, I have one final poll question to ask you all today. And you've all done so well so far, tuning in and listening to our presenters. And I hope that you guys have all taken something from today. But the last question that I want to ask you before we wrap things up and I get Gus to come back on to conclude everything is, are you able to provide your executives and board with a clear picture of malicious activity and risk to critical data, applications, and assets on and connecting to your networks? So is it yes? Is it no, not needed? Or is it no, but you plan to in the future, or you plan to work on providing clear pictures? So let me know what you think. It would be great to get some further insights on you all. And we will have a look at the next, on the next slide, which we slightly got a teaser to there, at what you all say. So I'll give you 10 seconds to answer those. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wonderful. So guys, thank you so much for answering that. The results. So are you able to provide your executives and board with a clear picture of malicious activity and risk to critical data, applications and assets on and connecting to your networks? 45.5% of you said yes and no, but plan to in the future. And 9% of you said no, it's not needed. So thank you so much for participating in that one. Now, before I hand it over to Gus to conclude with some final thoughts, I just want to point out to everybody that you will be able to rewatch all of this via the on-demand post-event links that we share with you post-event. So keep an eye out for those and you will be able to come back and rewatch anything that you may have missed today. Definitely check out those digital gift bags. And have a look at some of the extra information that is shared in those for you all. But Gus, I will hand it back to you.
Yeah, hi. You just dropped out there for a second. Can you guys hear me? Thumbs up?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Look, firstly, I'd like to thank AWS and Fortinet for their partnership today. Speakers Chris and Andrew, as well as our panellists Ian and AJ. It was great insight. Thanks, Ian and AJ. My key takeaways and the vibe from today's session, we're moving to the cloud. Our attack vectors are expanding. And the shared responsibility model as we move to the cloud is quite interesting. We need to get more familiar with it. Essentially, the customer data and identity ultimately remains the responsibility of the customer. And 80% of breaches come from the configuration issues related to that, including loss of password control. That was insightful for me. On that note, I've made a note here. NEC, we are world leaders in the digital identity space. Our biometrics platform, our digital platform, runs on the AWS distributed ledger. If you want to find more about that approach, just contact me directly. The number 2 note that I made here was that operational technology is becoming the focus of investment. And this is opening up more attack vectors, in particular around the government supply chain, that whole end-to-end process. When you look at government departments, that could extend deep up the chain and down the chain. So a lot of companies involved there. Change is happening in this space, and it's now the focus of draft bills and will become legislation in around late this year, early next year. And the third takeaway that I've got is that we're probably all overworked. Compliance is just not a tick box activity that you do once. It's an ongoing program, and I think Ian highlighted that very well. Ongoing program, perhaps automation is the key, perhaps education is the key, but we do know frameworks such as the Essential 8 are vital to getting the foundations correct. So it's a matter of picking a framework and sticking to it and doing it well, and then evolving your posture with regards to that. So I'd just like to close by saying NEC is a safe pair of hands. We've, along with our partners, we've been in the cyber game for quite a while. And our advisory team have a 10-day fixed price engagement. We can review your maturity to your chosen framework, such as the Essential 8. 10-day engagement, no more than 4 hours of your time, that's your investment, and the rest is done by our business advisors and software tools, processes, and expertise. The end deliverable will be a maturity report to your chosen framework. For our guests today, we're providing a discounted fixed price of $15,000 for this engagement. It's something to consider. Lastly, I'd like to thank all the attendees, and hopefully, sometimes cyber can be a dry activity. And hopefully you all found something that you can take away from this, and look forward to seeing you at the next event, be it face-to-face or video. And thank you, Isaac, for your hosting. Thank you.